In the words of Tom Fitzgerald, it's a brand new day for the New Jersey Devils organization. Sheldon Keefe had his introductory press conference, and I was in attendance. What were some of my main takeaways? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play announcer, Devils Wire for Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time credentialed media member, Trey Matthews. Back on the East Coast for a business trip. I had the great pleasure of attending Sheldon Keefe's introductory press conference. Had the chance to listen in to Tom Fitzgerald, David Blitzer, and of course, the man of the hour, Sheldon Keefe, address the Devils media. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different because I've already expressed my thoughts on Sheldon Keefe, his history, and how I feel like it can leak over to the Devils organization. I basically did a 3-part trilogy series, which included a crossover with Michael DiStefano of Locked On Leafs. If you have not checked out any of those episodes, I highly recommend pausing this episode and giving them a listen. But if you want a refresher, I like the hiring. I think Sheldon Keefe saw great offensive success in Toronto, and I think the Devils found the right man for the job. And honestly, I don't think personality plays that big of a factor. In today's episode, I will play you guys some sound bites from the press conference and share some of my main takeaways. Keep in mind, I'm not really breaking down as to whether or not this was a good hire by New Jersey, more or less just sharing some of my main takeaways from the press conference if you need any reassurance that Sheldon Keefe is the right person for the job. Throughout the course of the press conference, it lasted for nearly an hour. Matt Loughlin was the person running the conference. He was introducing everybody, and he was making sure that everything was running smoothly. And a lot of questions that came Sheldon Keefe's way was like, how much similarity is there between the Devils and the Maple Leafs? Because we've been having this debate on this show, which is both of those teams are high-octane offenses. However, their goaltending and their defense, a little bit of a question mark, but Michael DiStefano of Locked On Leafs, when he appeared on this show, he gave a different perspective. And if you look at the playoffs, offense was the main issue for the Maple Leafs, not really their defense or their goaltending. But I think for what it's worth for the Devils, they definitely need to up the ante in terms of defense and goaltending if they want to see any line of success. And Sheldon Keefe talked about the process and the similarities. First and foremost, he said, of course, he does see certain similarities just because the Devils' core four consists of Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, and Timo Meier. Not to mention, you also have some up-and-coming players like Simon Nemitz, Luke Hughes. You have an established player like Dougie Hamilton. There's a lot of potential for this Devils roster, and Keefe said it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. Now, some people were speculating that Sheldon Keefe was contemplating whether or not he wanted to jump back into the fire, including myself, because that's what I was hearing. But he clarified and just said he was taking a break from media, not necessarily coaching. And I think that's good. It means that he's in the right space mentally to continue with this task. And I'm sure he's learned a lot of lessons. That's the basic narrative I got from that press conference whenever he was asked between the comparisons of the Devils and the Maple Leafs. But the one thing I want to focus on is the team identity. And this was asked towards the end of his press conference. And I didn't get the chance to ask Sheldon Keefe a question because all the questions that I wanted to ask him were already asked, including this big one. The Devils had a certain identity to them. And he was quoted to say post-game at the conclusion of a Maple Leafs and Devils game that if you give Jack Hughes 2 breakaways, most likely you're not winning the game. And I wanted to see okay, where do you want to take this team? What kind of identity do you want to establish? How will you utilize the star players? Because I think that was a big issue from Lindy Ruff, because he didn't know how to utilize certain players, particularly Dawson Mercer, Alexander Holtz, and Timo Meyer. All three players good in their own aspects, and they do have their weaknesses, but I don't think Lindy utilized them the best way he could. That's why Mercer and Meyer saw more productive offense once Lindy was given the can. Here's what Keefe had to say in terms of establishing a team identity.
I think what you would expect from us is to play a style that is fast and competitive, that prioritizes pressure on the puck in all zones, but also leans in on the skill and makes plays. And in order to do that, you have to have the proper tools to do so. And I believe that we have those here. So I'm very excited to build out a plan that can maximize the strengths of our team, but also have a group that can develop cohesion and connectivity within the group on both sides of the puck that really shines through in all zones. So, and then ultimately building a team that is very good, not just in the skilled parts of the games, not just in the defensive parts of the games, but the game within the game. And I think there's, in our sport, as you see this time of year, you're turning on your TV, watching the playoffs, there's a lot that goes on that you have to be very comfortable in, and the group has to really stick together. And those are areas that I think we'll be focusing on a lot. And as we build the plan for training camp and into the regular season, we'll be working towards that end from the start.
Good to see that he is keeping the same identity. This Devils team, they got to play to their strengths, which is play fast, and the results will come. Because you have a lot of players that like to run and gun. Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier. I would argue and say that the Devils are one of the fastest teams in the league. But at the same time, they still have some areas to clean up. But if you just play to their strengths, this team can be dangerous. Case in point, when we saw other players step up their game, once there was a different voice behind the bench. And Keefe did say during his press conference that he did reach out to, I believe, all of the players. And I think they're all on board, which is they're not happy with how last season went. They had a lot of expectations. They dealt with a decent amount of injuries. And there were a lot of other obstacles that were in their path that they couldn't overcome. And the pressure is on from having a historic season to missing the playoffs. But the one thing I want to reassure to Devils fans is that this team is going to be just fine. If we just think about this logically, this Devils team, they were mathematically eliminated from playoff contention in early April. And let's think of some of the things that were in their path. Injuries. They didn't win no more than 3 games in a row, but they didn't lose no more than 3 in a row. They were sellers at the deadline, getting rid of Tyler Toffoli. They had a coaching change, moving on from Lindy Ruff and bringing in Travis Green as their interim head coach. A lot happened with the Devils organization, and I think it's impressive that they weren't mathematically eliminated from playoff contention until there was like a few weeks left in the regular season. I think that speaks volume. And I really hope that Sheldon Keefe gets through to his players and establishes that team identity. And some people have brought up the fact saying that Sheldon Keefe, he might be a little too soft. He might go a little easy. I'm going to call BS on that one. Once again, the Devils don't necessarily need a drill sergeant, but an example that I brought up in the past is John Tortorella, a guy who's notoriously known for being a hard ass, but he always has his players' best interests at heart. And Sheldon Keefe did play with Tortorella while Keefe was in the league on the Lightning roster before they won the Stanley Cup in 2004, and he brought that up in his press conference. I'm sure he's going to take some of those ideologies and lessons that he got from Torts and translate it over into New Jersey. And he even jokingly said that once the team got too good, there was just no room for him on the roster. But if you just need any sort of reassurance, I think he'll get through to the players. Unfortunately, something didn't get through in Toronto. but let's see how it translates over to this Devils team. All right, we're going to talk more in great detail as to what Keefe wants to see out of this player specifically. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if I had to give you guys a suggestion, bet on the Dallas Mavericks winning the NBA Finals and bet on the Dallas Stars to win it as well. A dual championship in Dallas, Texas. And this would be like the third championship in Texas the last few months, because remember, the Texas Rangers won the World Series. Please remember to gamble responsibly. Okay, let's talk about a word that was brought up frequently in Sheldon Keefe's press conference. I'm going to play you the soundbite, and I will give you guys my thoughts.
My philosophy of accountability is giving the players and the team what they need in the moment. You know, I don't think you can have one philosophy, hey, this is how I do it, and that's it. I think you have to be able to read and adapt to the situation, to each player, each personality, and with where the team is at. Sometimes you're doing it on a one-on-one basis in your office. Sometimes you're doing it right out in front of the team, because the team needs to know it and see it and know that the expectations are higher and we're not meeting them. So I think you've got to be flexible in everything that you do as a coach. You got your core values and your non-negotiables, and that's what we'll work through. You know, I'll be committed to being as educated as I can about what this team has been through to get to this point, and then we'll chart a path to continue to grow and build from here. And then the standard will be high. We'll continue to raise the bar on a daily basis to get to the point where we have something sustainable here that ultimately runs itself, and the players are pushing and challenging one another. That's my goal, to grow leaders. We'll have leaders that are obvious right from day one, and then we'll have emerging leaders that will develop underneath them that will allow us to continue to grow, day by day and year by year.
Throughout the course of the season, I think amongst the players, the fans, whomever, there was a lot of finger pointing, which is, this was the issue for Devils. That was the issue for Devils. Defense, goaltending, coaching, you name it. Nico Hischier not being a good captain. There was a lot of finger pointing, and it seemed like the Devils had more questions than answers. And how does this apply to the players? Well, sometimes the players said that they were a little immature, playing scared, which is why they sometimes got off to slow starts. Players' words and coaching staff's words, not mine. There was no accountability, in my opinion, and I loved when Sheldon Keefe was saying the word accountability throughout the course of his press conference, because I think that is so vital for New Jersey, because this Devils team is young, but they have so much upside and a lot of untapped potential that it's ridiculous. And I think now you have the right man for the job to try to reach that potential. And you can say whatever you want to say about Sheldon Keefe, but 18 years of being a head coach, he saw great success, whether it was in minors like the AHL or the NHL. That man knows how to reach the playoffs, which I think is the ultimate goal going into the season for the Devils. Get back to the playoffs and let the pawns fall as they may. And another point during the press conference is that Sheldon Keefe talked about the potential that this team has, possibly winning a Stanley Cup. Obviously, I'm sure any coach that's hired is going to say, I think this team can win a Stanley Cup within the near future. Define near future, like 1, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever the case might be. But I think this Devils team has the right pieces. They just need a little bit more assets before they become a legitimate title contender, but they are far from rebuilding. And Tom Fitzgerald also talked about the shortcomings, and I talked about the shortcomings in the previous segment. And basically, I think this team has a lot of potential. This team has a lot to show, once again, to the NHL. And I think people should be really excited. Here's what Sheldon Keefe had to say about how the roster is currently constructed.
As I say, the team is very good, which is why the expectations are high. And the team is good because the players are good, and there's incredible depth here. There's a great mix of youth and experience. There's skill at all positions at forward and defense that are very exciting to be able to get those groups connected on both sides of the puck, offensively and defensively, and to be able to capitalize on those skill sets and continue to grow them together. So lots of things are exciting there. With how quickly things have gone, I don't sit here and say I have all the answers and have all the information, frankly, but I'm very excited to get to work. What I do know is the talent is there, the hunger is there, and the commitment is there. I can tell from the initial conversations that I've had, going back and forth with some of the players. It's been very clear that they're not happy with last season, and they're excited to look ahead and get to work. So all those things together, for me, made it very clear that that I was ready to get back into this, and this was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up.
Now, I did you guys a favor. I asked Tom Fitzgerald how the offseason is treating him because, as I like to call on my show, there's been a lot of silly season discussion, particularly a big name player out in Ottawa. That's not going to happen. Or Mitch Marner, he could be available via trade. I was basically trying to ask Tom Fitzgerald, is this it? Or can we expect something else? I think he knew where I was getting at. And he just said, this is just the first step. And now he's just going through a checklist. And I think that's a sign of things to come. Now, what's going to happen down the line? I don't really know, but Tom Fitzgerald was teasing me a little bit, saying this is just the first step, and I think we can expect a lot more, knock on wood. So I'm very excited to see how the Devils proceed with this offseason, and I'm also intrigued with how Tom Fitzgerald reached out to Sheldon Keefe and how he was considered for the position. I think it's safe to say that some people were antsy when it came to figuring out who the next head coach was going to be for the Devils, because Pierre LeBrun, he was saying the Devils would have an answer in 7 to 10 days. And then those 7 to 10 days turned into 15 days before the Devils made it official with Sheldon Keefe. And Fitzy actually talked about the process of reaching out to Sheldon Keefe and basically convincing him to come to New Jersey. Check it out.
When I look back at the process, it was pretty thorough. I called it the gauntlet to the people who went through it because it was extensive. I spent a lot of time with a lot of great candidates. One thing that I was consistent with was waiting and being patient in the process, allowing the first round to see through and see what possibly could shake out. And I stuck with that. And I wasn't going to budge from that. I wasn't going to move off of waiting to just hire somebody. And there were great candidates, great qualities. But when the Toronto Maple Leafs lost out, immediately I called Brad Treliving, the GM of the Leafs, and asked if it was possible to have permission to talk to Sheldon. I asked him to call Sheldon and asked Sheldon if he would accept my phone call. I'm grateful he did. That one phone call that night led to the possibility of another phone call. He accepted that call. That phone call led to another phone call of just talking hockey, philosophies, the things that you believe in as a coach. That conversation was about 3 hours long. From there, I just kind of left this in his court with his family, knowing that if he wanted this job was his. But I completely understood where he was in this process, and I knew this was a family decision. That one call led to a text. That text led to another text. This is a great day for the New Jersey Devils. But I can tell you, last Tuesday night was a great day for me, knowing this day was coming, that we'd be able to announce Sheldon Keefe as our next head coach. So Sheldon checked a lot of boxes that I was looking for.
Like I said, there was really no rush for Tom Fitzgerald to make a decision right then and there. And I found it interesting that he said that he interviewed 10 candidates for the position, and some of them had no shot of getting the job. But he said he was curious and he wanted to see where their headspaces were at. And once Sheldon Keefe was eliminated from playoff contention with the Toronto Maple Leafs, he was like, maybe Sheldon Keefe will be available and maybe we should bring him over to New Jersey. And I think that's when the reports came out saying that Sheldon Keefe was the front runner to land the Devils position, because some notable NHL insiders were talking about it. And I even talked about it on my show, saying that I think there is a new front runner, because we talked about Craig Berube, we talked about Todd McClellan, we talked about Mike Sullivan. There was basically a decent amount of choices that the Devils could choose from, but they ultimately settled on Sheldon Keefe. And I liked how Tom Fitzgerald took his time with the process, because I've been saying it the past few episodes. You cannot keep playing musical chairs when it comes to finding a coach. You cannot just settle on this coach and then 1 to 2 years later you fire him. That's not going to work with this young core. They need an established identity, which is why I think it was important for Sheldon Keefe to say, here's where the Devils are going to thrive in. Here's where I hope to utilize them correctly. You need that established identity. And I think that's been one of the detriment for this young core, which is they've gone through a decent amount of head coaches. And I think it's time for some stability. So if you're saying fire Tom Fitzgerald, fire this person, fire that person, I say pump the brakes. If you really want the Devils to be successful, they need some established chemistry. And we saw how that can sort of pan out on the ice. I'm excited for Sheldon Keefe, and I think he said all the right things he needed to say at his press conference. There was nothing really groundbreaking. There was nothing really surprising. And if you're wondering why we, the media, did not ask Tom Fitzgerald his offseason plans in terms of acquiring this player or that player, it's not the place or time to ask that type of question. It's a happy day in New Jersey. Let's focus on Sheldon Keefe. Because similar to what Tom Fitzgerald said during his press conference, it's a new day for the New Jersey Devils, and it's an exciting day. Let's just focus on Sheldon Keefe, and I think a lot of people are going to fall in love with him, and he's a proven winner. Calder Cup, leading the Maple Leafs to the second round for the first time since 2004. The power play success, the regular season success, the development of the core four. I think that can all translate to New Jersey. And I think the Devils discourse, we should consider ourselves lucky that Tom Fitzgerald got a great piece added to this organization. But those are just my thoughts, and those are some of my takeaways from the press conference. Let me know what you guys think. I know the press conference was nearly an hour long, and I didn't break down every single thing, but those are some things that really stood out for me. But if I missed something, let me know in the comment section. Like I said, it was nearly an hour long. Couldn't cover every single thing, but I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.